What's up guys, Rowan here from Artist Smart TV. Medicine is one of those degrees that's incredibly popular but also as a result incredibly difficult to get into. And in recent years there's been some changes with UMAT turning into UCAT, and there's always stress and anxiety about how to best navigate the journey to hopefully get that valued offer for placement in medicine at the end of your HSC. And so today I'm going to be chatting with James, who has successfully navigated this journey himself, from working hard during his HSC, navigating UCAT, interviews, ATAR, and successfully receiving an offer to study medicine at Adelaide University. So let's find out what James's tips and advice are to successfully navigate the journey yourself. So welcome, James.
Hello.
Now, did you always know you wanted to do medicine?
No, not at all. Probably even in year 11 I thought, wow, being a doctor would suck, terrible job. Everyone's depressed and you have to work long hours. So it's really been a later thing in life for me.
And what changed for you then? From thinking, wow, that would suck, to, hey, I'm going to do the work, because there's a lot of work involved to make it possible.
My little brother had a rare heart condition, and that was obviously quite a hard time for my family. But he had a really modern advanced surgery where they used catheters to burn out a small piece of his heart, and it's completely reversed all of his symptoms, and he's now living a healthy, normal life. And I think it was just that kind of process that really inspired me to have a look at what being a doctor or doing medicine really entails, because it's not just being a practicing doctor. There's plenty more options with it as well. You can be a researcher, can be involved in policy or administration. So yeah, I think that experience really changed my mind.
Yeah, wow. And the journey is, obviously you've got to do well academically, so you've got to push the ATAR along. Yeah. But simultaneous to that, you've got to go through UCAT, and then if you're successful in getting invited for some interviews, you then have to navigate the interview process. So for UCAT, how did you prepare? I know, technically it's meant to be something that you shouldn't prepare for, but did you do anything to sort of maximise your chances?
Yeah, you definitely have to prepare. Even on their website, they provide a fairly reasonable timeline. With the UMAT before, I think they said that you could just go in on the day, and it's really not the case. My main tip is to just do as much practice as possible. So I personally use the service called Medify. There's plenty more. I think there's Kaplan, UCAT Masterclass, MedEntry. There's plenty of options. But the main thing you really need to do is just practice. So I unfortunately was very ill-prepared, or ill-managed with my time. And so I really didn't start cramming until probably three weeks before the test. That's when I really started to amp it up. It's throughout the month of July, and you can pick any day.
So in other words, you started in June sometime? Yeah, to really do the work?
I was at the end of July for my actual test, and I think I probably started halfway through June, which was a big mistake.
So then what would your recommendation be? Given that you're being very clear, yes, you need to do prep, you need to get exposed to practice. When's the best time to do it? Because I know students that start doing it, the summer holidays before, the year before, that are being very proactive because they're also mindful of managing a HSC. Yeah. What would your recommendation be in hindsight?
It really depends on who you are and how well you do actually manage your time. I know that I definitely sabotaged my trials with the UCAT, and I think most kids that want to do med will be in a similar situation. I think all of us were probably 10, 20, 30% lower than we're expecting. So I really recommend getting on top of it now. Before
so summer holidays, essentially.
Yeah, right now, before school really starts to amp up, at least just get the feel for it. In that, realistically, that really intense preparation is going to burn you out if you're not doing it right before the test with all that motivation. But really have a good foundation now. Maybe do a mock or two just to see where you are. I recommend not doing the official UCAT mocks until right before the exam, only because there's only 3 of them and they're the most valuable resource. But definitely try the official UCAT questions now. See how you're going. There's a lot of time pressure in the exam. For abstract reasoning, you get 14 seconds a question. So, and that was my weakest link. And so I really recommend getting on top of whatever you're struggling with right now. But don't be too worried if you feel like you're not doing as much as your friends. I probably prepared the least out of my friends, and I did quite well. So it's really about getting as much practice in when you can, but not worrying.
So to put this in context, I guess, one, you're saying, which I think a really good piece of advice, actually do it in the summer holidays and maybe build the foundation then, because otherwise your trials are going to suffer.
Yeah.
And the trick is you obviously need to get this UCAT and this ATAR, and so you don't want your trials to suffer that much. So it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
So if you can pull it forward a little bit, front load it before the work kicks in for, HSC year, you've laid a foundation, which means that when you're getting closer to the UCAT itself and your trials, you're more doing a refresh, that final polish, hopefully, rather than like the bulk of your work. What I'm also hearing is do a diagnosis, take some questions, identify your weak areas,
For sure.
double down on that. What I'm curious about is, should students view the UCAT just like an entire other HSC subject?
Yeah, if you're really good at rigidly structuring your study, I think that's a great idea. Doing half an hour a day as you lead up to the test is very handy. And I think that's the best way to do it in hindsight.
So then you got through UCAT,
Yep.
and obviously you did well enough to get a number of invites for interviews, which is fantastic. You've then got this next hurdle of an interview.
Yeah.
So, did you do any preparation for that? Like, what did that look like?
So I did lots of informal preparation. If you browse along med students online, there are lots of past questions that they ask in interviews, and I highly recommend just learning how to answer those sorts of questions, not in a fake or regurgitative way because they can tell, but more about just gaining that sort of confidence speaking about it and knowing what you're going to say.
So that way you don't get surprised, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you get a question the first time, your answer is probably not going to be that good. So
Exactly.
it's trying to reduce that surprise element. So did you, when you were looking at these questions on med students online as past examples, were you getting a parent or a family member or a friend to ask you these and sort of going through a bit of a role play? Like, what did that look like for you in terms of practice?
Yeah, so fortunately for me, my mum does hundreds of job interviews a year. And I recommend finding someone similar, someone that really has experience just grilling people, asking, are you telling the truth? I don't believe you. Oh, okay. Just being not mean, but acting like a really hard to read, tough interviewer. And someone that asks you lots of follow-up questions, because that's what they tend to do in the actual interviews. They definitely follow you up, or they might just look out in the corner like this, like, oh, okay. But they're still listening to you and they're just testing you, and it's important to find someone that can help you practice with that element.
So what you're wanting is someone that is asking some tough questions and being firm. Did you find that was the nature, you got in there and you got interviewers that didn't give anything away, that asked tough questions?
Yeah, so with the MMI interviews, it's a bit of a mix. I think it also depends on where you are. So when I went to the Western Sydney interview, everyone was really friendly and kind, but there were some that were clearly trying to sort of put on a good cop, bad cop sort of game face, but I think if you can just be nice and have like a normal conversation, that quickly fades away. Some of my friends that went to the Newcastle interview said it was a lot different. When I went to Armidale, so everyone was happy and friendly. It's just kind of the nature of the place. But yeah, lots of my friends said that they had some tough interviewers.
So then a question here, you didn't memorise responses to possible questions, right? You had practice, your mum grilling you at home, but there was never a memorised response. Is that correct?
I think the only one that, it depends how confident you are speaking in person, but if you do have to memorise questions, if you feel you need to, the only one you should do is, why do you want to do medicine? Because if they ask you that and you're going, I don't know, it's a really bad look. It's the most important question. So if that sounds like it's also a tip, right? Make sure you have a very good answer
for that question.
Yeah, as an aside, I think the most important thing if you want to do medicine is to really want to do it. You need to have that motivation to go through all these extra steps and want to fly around the country for interviews and that sort of thing. And if you aren't really, if you don't feel like you're sure this year, by all means go ahead, do the interviews or whatever. But there's nothing wrong with doing a science degree or something completely unrelated and doing postgraduate medicine. Most universities prefer that nowadays, and I think you really do need to have that drive to be able to survive it and not just be traumatized by the end.
So any other tips or suggestions for students navigating the journey to medicine?
Yeah, sort of on a similar note, you have to be really realistic with your expectations. I think I counted and there's like maybe 700 places along like South Australia and the East Coast. Maybe a few more, but there's so many people applying. I think 12,000 people or something sat the UCAT. So you need to have some reasonable expectations, and you really do need to have a realistic view, right? I did fly to Townsville and Adelaide to do the interviews, and I think you should be prepared to have to move interstate if you want to study medicine. If you can't because of other factors, that's fine. You can always try and get in another year, but you really do need to have that inherent sort of drive behind it, or you'll burn out.
So I think what's interesting is definitely the expectation piece there, because that's almost maybe 1 in 12. You know, like if you were saying that 700 to 12,000, you know, like I think it's even less than that, the odds, right? So
even if you get an interview, right? At Western Sydney, for example, there's 400 interviews and there's only 100 places. So you really need to be prepared to just leave and go, oh, okay.
It might not be what I'm going to do. Fantastic. So there you've heard it, guys. I think some really practical bits of advice about how to navigate the journey of UCAT interviews and hopefully getting an offer to study medicine. If you have any questions about the journey and what to do, leave it in the comments below, and one of our team will get back to you. Of course, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. We bring videos to you every single week, so we will see you next week.